The conference room fell silent the moment Patrick waved my promotion letter, like it was yesterday's trash. "Mark, you can't be serious," he said, laughing, that cruel, dismissive laugh that had become the soundtrack to my 5 years here. "You think you're ready for a managerial role? You're good at spreadsheets, not leadership. Maybe next decade." My throat closed. The others looked away. That particular shame of people pretending not to witness your destruction. I'd built this department from nothing. 12-hour days, sacrifice birthdays, Christmases, relationships. All of it was on me. "Sir," I said quietly, though my hands trembled, "I've handled 3 of your major clients solo this year." Patrick leaned back in his chair, arms folded, and I took the credit. "That's how the world works, Mark." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that echoes like knives. Through the glass walls, I watched him hand the promotion folder to Jenna, the woman I'd trained for the past 8 months. She smiled, that victorious smile that said she'd known all along. That was the moment something broke inside me. But it wasn't rage. It was clarity. I didn't drive home. I drove to Lake Michigan, where the November wind carried the scent of winter and possibility. The water looked black under the Chicago sky, calm on the surface, endless underneath. I sat on the concrete barrier for an hour, watching the city lights blur through eyes I refused to let cry. 5 years. I'd given Patrick 5 years of my life. Not just my time, my talent, my ideas, my future. I ghosted his proposals, covered his mistakes before clients saw them, stayed silent while he took credit for work that was mine down to the last decimal point. And he'd repaid loyalty with contempt. When I finally looked at my reflection in the water, I didn't see a broken man. I saw someone who'd been asleep. Someone who'd been waiting for someone else to recognize his worth. That was the real tragedy. I whispered something into the wind. Not a curse, but a promise. Never again. My father had died believing I'd make something of myself. The man who'd worked 3 jobs to put me through college. Who'd taught me that dignity and hard work were the only currency that mattered. I would let that dream die in Patrick's shadow. When I rejoined Harrington and Company, I wasn't the same man who walked out 5 years ago. Fresh from grad school, I'd been hungry, eager to prove myself, to climb, to please. Patrick had seen that hunger and weaponized it. He'd praised me in meetings, called me his guy, and I'd believe him. I'd believe that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. Looking back, I could see the machinery of it all. The small raises designed to keep me grateful, but not ambitious. The public compliments that made everyone think I was valued, while he quietly built Jenna as my replacement. The promises he never intended to keep. Some betrayals don't happen overnight. They're like rust, slow, invisible, until one day everything you built collapses in silence. But I'd been asleep. Now I was awake. Everyone knew by the time I got to the office. The fake smiles stung worse than insults would have. People I'd helped, projects I'd guided to success, none of it mattered now. I was yesterday's news. Jenna waited by the coffee machine, perfectly poised in her new title. "Morning, Assistant Ellis," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Heard you're covering my old reports now. Try not to mess them up." I clenched my jaw but managed a thin smile. "Congratulations, Jenna." "Thanks," she said, moving closer, lowering her voice. "Patrick said loyalty doesn't equal leadership. Maybe you'll learn that next time." I turned away before she could see my eyes, but not before noticing something. Uncertainty flickered beneath her smugness. She was performing confidence, not feeling it. Back at my desk, I stared at the computer screen for hours, pretending to work while something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, sharp and real. But underneath, it was something else. Purpose. That's when the message came. "Mr. Ellis, the CEO would like to meet you personally at 4 p.m. Please come to the executive floor." Patrick's face went pale when he overheard someone mention my name in passing. For the first time in 5 years, I saw fear flicker across his face. The CEO's office was nothing like Patrick's. No clutter, no fake accolades on the walls. Just calm authority and a view of the entire city. "Mark," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I've been watching your numbers. They're remarkable. My voice barely worked. Thank you, sir. He studied me for a long moment. The kind of assessment that made me understand he saw things others missed. I hear you were passed over for promotion. I nodded. Yes, sir. Patrick's had too much control for too long. He said simply, I need people with vision, not vanity. He leaned forward. Let's keep this between us. I'm restructuring soon. Be patient and keep doing what you do. I walked out numb, heart pounding. Patrick was waiting outside his office, and he'd seen me emerge from the executive floor. His jaw tightened. So the big boss likes you, he sneered. Don't get ideas above your pay grade, Mark. But this time, I didn't look away. For the first time in 5 years, I smiled, not to appease him, but because I'd been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. And he noticed. His smirk faltered. Everything changed after that meeting, but in ways nobody could see. Patrick began his attacks immediately. Classic tactics. He gave me impossible deadlines, sent Jenna to supervise my work, rewrote my emails before sending them to clients with her name instead of mine. Every move was designed to humiliate me, to prove I was nothing without his blessing. But each time he tried to break me, I grew quieter, steadier. You're scaring him, Jenna whispered one evening as we grabbed coffee. But not the Jenna from the office. This was a different version, the one who'd been slowly waking up to what Patrick actually was. She'd come to my desk 3 weeks after getting her promotion, and her expression had told me everything. The role he'd promised her wasn't what she'd expected. The credit for ideas was still going elsewhere. The real work, the hard, detailed, brilliant work, wasn't hers either. She was learning what I'd learned. I'm not scaring him, I said softly. I'm just not reacting anymore. That's what scares him, she replied. Over the next weeks, Jenna became my confidant, not out of romance, but recognition. She'd seen the patterns I'd seen. The falsified expense reports, the phantom vendor accounts, the way Patrick had been slowly embezzling company money, funneling it through consulting firms that didn't exist, projects that were never real. One evening, she brought me documentation. It's more than favoritism, she said quietly. It's fraud. I found it in the accounting files. I think he's been moving money through offshore accounts. That's when I realized Patrick hadn't just wronged me. He'd wronged the company, the investors, everyone. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. I didn't tell Jenna everything I was doing, not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted to protect her. If things went wrong, she couldn't be blamed for my actions. Instead, I met quietly with Nathan Hale, the merger liaison, a tall, calm man with sharp eyes. When he requested to meet the unsung heroes of each department, I knew exactly what that meant. In that meeting, I didn't downplay my role. I told him everything I'd managed, every client I'd saved, every project I'd guided. He listened and took notes, but more importantly, he believed me, not because I was begging for validation, but because the evidence spoke for itself. By night, I began building a file, 3 inches thick by the time I finished. Every instance of embezzlement, every falsified invoice, every unauthorized transfer, every email where Patrick had taken credit for my work, every signature forged on documents. I even had audio, a drunken voicemail Patrick had left me, bragging about how he played the board like children. I didn't know if I'd ever need to use it, but I wanted to be ready. Jenna noticed my late nights. You're not going to do anything illegal, are you? She asked one evening, worry creasing her forehead. I smiled faintly. No, just fair. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt something besides rage. I felt like maybe, when this was over, there could be something else. Someone to stand beside me who understood. The merger was finalized 2 weeks later. Nathan took over operations quietly, observing before making changes. Patrick tried too hard. Suddenly charming, sending long reports full of jargon that said nothing. Jenna began distancing herself from him. I noticed how she stopped laughing at his jokes, how she'd excuse herself when he tried to pull her into his orbit. At the end of one long strategy session, Nathan said, "Mark, could you stay back a minute?" Patrick tensed but said nothing. When the room cleared, Nathan smiled slightly. You're the only one here who seems to understand what this company actually does. I'm going to need someone I can trust to lead the next phase. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Expect more responsibility soon, he said. Real responsibility. For the first time, I felt the floor tilt in my direction. Patrick didn't take it well. He began spreading rumors that I was unstable, that I had a drinking problem, that I had made inappropriate advances toward Jenna. He filed complaints with HR, and suddenly I was called in for a behavioral review while he played concerned colleague. Jenna was there, but unlike what he'd orchestrated, she didn't cry or confirm his lies. Instead, she sat quietly, and when asked if his accusations were true, she simply said, "No, they're not." Her voice was steady, unshakable. The HR representative looked at Patrick, then back at me. Something in her expression told me she knew exactly what was happening. That night, Jenna came to my apartment with takeout and wine. You could report him, she said. Go to HR officially. They'd listen. Not yet, I said quietly. He needs to show his true face first. Completely. Everyone needs to see it. She looked at me, searching. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, I said. Just justice. The email went out Wednesday morning. Subject: urgent quarterly review and audit findings. Attendance mandatory. Signed by the CFO, but drafted by Nathan himself. The board would be there. The investors. Even Richard Hale, Patrick's former mentor, the man who'd once called him the company's future. Patrick swaggered into my office that afternoon, waving the email with false confidence. You really should leave this stuff to the actual executives, Mark. I glanced up from my screen. Oh, I understand perfectly. These audits are just numbers, he said, settling into the chair across from me like he owned the space. And numbers can be interpreted creatively. Numbers, I said softly, meeting his gaze. Don't lie. People do. He frowned, sensing something had shifted. For the first time, he seemed unsure. What are you getting at? I only smiled. See you Friday, Patrick. By Friday morning, the building buzzed with nervous energy. Whispers about discrepancies, missing funds, HR looking into things. Patrick arrived late, cologne heavy, grin wider than ever. But I could see the cracks now. The way his hand trembled slightly when he signed documents. The way he kept checking his phone. He stopped by my desk one last time, tapping my shoulder. You nervous today, Mark? Don't be. You'll see how real power works. I didn't look up from my screen. Oh, I think everyone will. The glass walls of the boardroom shimmered with November sunlight. Suits lined the long table. Patrick took his seat at the head, perfectly confident in his arrogance. Let's begin, he announced, sliding his laptop forward to present the quarterly report. But before he could start, Nathan interrupted. Actually, I've asked Mark to walk us through some findings first. Mark. I stood, carrying the presentation I prepared with surgical precision. Patrick's face went white. This is highly irregular, he started. It's necessary, the CFO said quietly. My presentation began with numbers. Clean, irrefutable numbers. Then screenshots of email chains. Then timelines. Each slide peeled away layers of his empire like an onion, revealing nothing but rot underneath. His signature on falsified invoices. His authorization on phantom vendor accounts. Transfers from the company client fund directly to his personal account. The room went silent except for his breathing. Ragged now, shallow. You can't. Patrick started, but his voice cracked. There's more, I said, my own voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Would you like me to play the audio recording from March, when you explained to your friend how you played the board like children? Gasps. A pen clattered to the floor. His face cycled through emotions, shock, denial, rage, fear. This is absurd, he shouted, standing. She's lying. He's lying. This is a setup. Then perhaps, I said quietly, turning my laptop toward him, you can explain the $74,000 transfer from our client fund to your personal account last March? Silence. Or the consulting company registered to your brother-in-law that never actually provided services? His jaw worked soundlessly. Or the fact that you've been embezzling company funds for nearly 3 years? The next hour was a masterclass in watching someone's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Patrick tried everything: denial, deflection, accusations. He called me bitter and jealous. He said I had manipulated the data, that I was mentally unstable, that I'd forged documents out of revenge for not getting a promotion. But with each claim, Nathan or the CFO, or I had documentation, screenshots, recordings, bank statements, witnesses from accounting. He attempted to blame Jenna, claiming she'd helped him, trying to drag her into the chaos. She stood calmly and said, I reported my concerns to Nathan 2 months ago. I have written documentation of everything I observed. Security entered the room. The CFO whispered something to an HR representative, Richard Hale, Patrick's mentor, the man who'd sponsored him for years, looked ashen, aged by 30 seconds of revelation. When they finally asked me to step out of the room for a moment, Patrick lunged toward me. For a second, I saw pure desperation in his eyes. The moment he understood that it was over. You think this makes you a hero, he hissed. You'll never survive without me. You're nothing without me. I looked him dead in the eye, not with rage, but with pity. You're right about one thing, Patrick. I will survive without you. That's exactly what I'm going to do. 2 hours later, Patrick Bennett was escorted from the building by security. Not arrested yet. That would depend on the company's legal team's decision. But utterly finished. No applause. No dramatic farewell. Just the kind of silence that cuts deeper than any shout ever could. I stood by the boardroom window, watching the city sprawl beneath the gray sky. For the first time in 5 years, my body didn't ache. My hands didn't shake. I could breathe without feeling like something was crushing my chest. Nathan approached quietly and placed his hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. I did what needed to be done, I replied. That's the same thing, he said. Jenna found me later in the break room, and without a word, she hugged me. It was the first kindness I'd allowed myself to receive in longer than I could remember. 3 weeks later, I was promoted to Director of Operations. My name appeared on the projects I'd built from scratch. My ideas were credited to me. The clients I'd managed sent congratulatory notes. There was no Patrick to take that away. But the promotion felt less important than something else. Peace. Jenna and I began having lunch regularly. Real lunches, not guilty conferences in my apartment. We talked about work, but also about books and movies and the future. About what it felt like to be seen. One evening, she brought a bottle of wine to my apartment. Not out of crisis, but out of celebration. You know what the strangest part is? She asked as we stood on my small balcony, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Everyone acts like you fought some epic battle. But from what I saw, you just told the truth. I documented the truth. I corrected. There's a difference. Telling it would have got me nowhere. But showing it, irrefutable, undeniable, that's what changed things. Still, she said, you could have just moved on. Found another job, another company. I agreed, but then nothing would have changed. Someone else would be where I was. Someone else would be invisible, silenced, exploited. She smiled softly. The man I knew 5 years ago wouldn't have done this. No, I said, but the man my father raised wouldn't have settled for less either. I forgot that for a while. The corporate scandal made headlines in industry publications. Articles about toxic leadership, embezzlement, the importance of whistleblowers. Some people asked if I felt vindicated. The honest answer was complicated. Yes, I felt vindicated. Patrick had deserved exactly what he got. The company was better off without him. Justice had been served. But there was a cost I hadn't anticipated. The relationship I'd mentioned to Jenna that first night. The one that fell apart because I couldn't prioritize love over work. That relationship was truly over now. Not because of Patrick, but because of the person I'd become while fighting him. I'd lost 2 years of my life to anger and strategy and planning. I'd made myself unavailable, consumed by the need for justice. I'd won, but the victory tasted hollow in some ways. Walking to the office one day, I saw a young woman, probably just graduated, eager and hopeful, full of belief that hard work would be rewarded. I recognized her completely. I'd been her. The thought terrified me. That night, I called my mother and apologized for missing her birthday 3 months ago. I scheduled time with my sister. I made a list of things I actually wanted to do with my life. Not things I thought I should want, but genuine desires. I was finally free. But freedom, I realized, required more than just eliminating what was wrong. It required building something right in its place. The company thrived under Nathan's leadership. Toxic people were systematically removed. Talented people, real talent, not politics, were promoted. The atmosphere shifted from survival mode to genuine collaboration. I was good at my job, but I was learning to do it without consuming my entire life. I started seeing someone, not Jenna, though we remained close friends. Someone I met through mutual friends, an architect named Sophie, who challenged me to think beyond work, who reminded me that ambition without joy was just suffering by another name. One evening, I was invited to speak at a business conference about corporate ethics and accountability. The moderator asked me the question everyone wanted answered. If you would give advice to someone currently experiencing workplace exploitation, what would you say? I thought about it carefully. First, document everything. Don't rely on memory or he said, she said. Facts, dates, numbers, evidence. Second, don't do it alone. Find allies, people who see what you see and have integrity. Third, understand that justice often takes longer than you expect, but that doesn't make it less real. And fourth, I paused. Don't let the fight become your entire life. The goal isn't to win at all costs. The goal is to build something better, for yourself and for others. The audience stood and applauded. But the moment that mattered most came after the conference when a young man, couldn't have been more than 25, approached me. I'm in a situation like yours, he said quietly. My boss has been stealing credit for months. I didn't know what to do. I thought about just leaving. But after hearing you speak, I realize I don't have to disappear. I can actually do something about it. I place my hand on his shoulder, document everything, carefully, quietly, and find someone you can trust absolutely. The rest will follow. He nodded, and as he walked away, I realized something. My journey hadn't just been about vindication. It had been about learning that silence was a choice and speaking up was possible, even when everything felt impossible. A year after Patrick was arrested, an industry magazine ran a feature titled, The Fall of Patrick Bennett, How One Quiet Man Changed a Company's Culture. The article was surprisingly fair. It didn't glorify me or turn me into a hero. It simply told the story of what happened when someone finally said no to corruption. At the gala celebrating ethical leaders in business, I wore a dark suit and stood at the bar, watching a room of lawyers and executives and entrepreneurs. Jenna found me, looking stunning in an emerald dress. Still hiding in corners? She teased. Just observing, I said. Old habits. Not all old habits are bad ones, she said, smiling. Self-awareness is underrated. When I accepted the award for corporate integrity, I stood on the stage under bright lights and thought about 5 years, about the person I'd been, eager and naive and crushable, about the person I'd become, careful and strategic and harder than I'd ever wanted to be, about the person I was becoming. Someone who learned that justice and peace weren't contradictory, just incompatible with compromise. This award isn't about me, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. It's about everyone who's ever been silenced, overlooked, or exploited in the workplace. It's about the courage it takes to tell the truth, not loudly, not dramatically, but simply and consistently. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. But when you're listening, really listening, it always arrives. The audience rose in applause, and as the lights shimmered against the crystal and glass, I felt the weight lift, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to smile, enough to know that the best revenge isn't actually revenge at all. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be. My story proves one thing. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. For 5 years, I watched while Patrick took everything. I watched while my worth was questioned, my ideas erased, my loyalty weaponized against me. But I learned that respect is non-negotiable. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart, not by who gets the credit, not by who believes you first. My silence became my weapon, and my patience became my power. If my story resonated with you, I'm asking you to share it. Send it to someone who's been gaslit into invisibility, someone who's been told they're too rigid, too sensitive, too ambitious. Tell them this. Your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. You don't have to accept the role they've written for you. The revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about setting boundaries, finding your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Because your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting to be remembered.